It is 7 o'clock, so we are going to get started tonight. Thank you for joining me tonight. My name is Mary Pat O'Neill. I'm an independent college counselor, and I'm here representing the Lake Washington Schools Foundation and the Find Your Fit program. And tonight's webinar is a middle school parent's guide to navigating high school. If you've ever been to a Find Your Fit presentation, you know I don't have at least one frozen screen here. It's not a Find Your Fit presentation. Let's see here. There we go. Okay, so a couple uh, notes here before we begin. So this webinar is being recorded tonight. The recording and resources will be sent out to everyone who registered. This is done by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation, not by me, and is typically done within a week of the webinar. I will not be sending out all my slides. I may send out a few of them. I will also be answering questions at the end. This part of the webinar will not be recorded. And I always want parents to understand that I am not a school counselor. I do not work for the Lake Washington Schools Foundation or the Lake Washington Schools School District. As I said earlier, I'm an independent college counselor and I volunteer my services with the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. I created the Find Your Fit program back in 2016, and I'm very proud to be associated with the foundation and the work that we do. And I do it as a way to give back to the community, because I happen to be somebody who didn't grow up with much. So I like to provide information to level the playing field. So tonight, what we're going to be talking about is how high school is different than middle school, what parents can do to prepare their children for high school, the different paths that are available after high school, an overview of applying to colleges in the United States, what colleges will be asking for, and how parents can help their child navigate all of this. And so I have a lot of tips for parents that I'll be sharing depending on the topic. And it's interesting. So I am a parent myself. I'm here in Redmond. My my husband and I have two adult children. They went to Eastlake and then on to undergraduate and graduate school, and both doing great. Very proud of both of them. And it's been interesting because, as I said, my children are adults. One is 29 and one is 27. And just seeing how the district has changed, the pressure, remote learning. Our kids have been through a lot. And there's a lot of information that floats around about all of this. I can tell you because I see things on the Facebook page for the middle school and high school. There's some bad information that gets sent around. There's some good information. And I'm hoping that with the information that you get here tonight, you'll have a better understanding. Hopefully, it'll take away some of the anxiety that I think a lot of parents might have. I'm really hoping that the information that I provide you can help you take away your child's anxiety, because our kids, they have a lot of pressure on them. A lot of it doesn't need to be on them. And so, anyways, I'm hoping that tonight uh, everybody will feel a little bit better afterwards. That's what I hope. So it is a huge transition to go from middle school to high school. And the and tonight I don't want to go too deep into the weeds with middle school parents. If you're an eighth grader, if you're the parent of an eighth grader, you are the class of 29. If you're the parent of a seventh grader, you're the class of 30. These years sound so far away, although I know they will be here before we know it. So I'm going to try to keep things kind of surface level. Obviously, during the question and answer period, I'm happy to answer more detailed questions. But the first thing I want to talk about is the high school. So our school district has wonderful high schools. There's also choice schools that our kids can go to. And I think just in the last week or so, if you were in the lottery for a choice school, you may have heard whether or not your child got in. And again, I see people, parents asking questions and doing all that stuff. The thing I want you to understand, or some guidance, I guess I can give you, if your child got a spot at a choice school, but ultimately you and your child decided that that school was not the right fit, that it, didn't align with your child's interests or is too small, too big, whatever. That's okay. Colleges do not know that your child could have gone to a choice school and chose to go to their regular school or anything like that. So my advice regarding choosing the high school is our regular schools are phenomenal. Uh, you know, I've worked with kids at all of the different schools, and if they want a STEM path, they can get it. If they want a business path, they can get it. If they're interested in the humanities or law or whatever, the options are there. If they choose to go to a choice school, that's great. And if you find out after a year that that choice school is not the right fit, because again, we're all different, it's okay to transfer back to your regular school. They always have to take you at the regular high school. So just know that. And then another thing that is important, and this is something that I've noticed, especially since the remote learning and the pandemic, is sometimes students have lost their good habits that they had prior. And so this is a good time to work with your students to make sure that they're turning in their work on time, that they know how to study, that they know how to read. That's, there's a lot of, a lot of some skills have been lost, and these are important skills. So this is a good time over the summer or working with a coach or somebody or taking a study class, but just make sure that your child is prepared for high school and that their habits are good. So these are some of the basic differences between middle school and high school. So first of all, the high schools are much bigger than the middle schools are, especially if your child has been at a choice middle school. My kids went to a choice middle school. When you go from a 90-person student or school to a 2,500, that's a big change. Also, the classes often are mixed with the grades. So it's possible that your ninth grader can have seniors in their class, or, I remember when my daughter was in 10th grade, she had a lot of seniors in her classes and things like that. There's going to be more work and it's going to be harder. Every year, the work typically becomes more difficult. They're going from being the oldest in the middle school to being the youngest again. Grades count. Sometimes students don't understand this, but for students who end up applying to a four-year or a four-year university after high school, their college application is technically starting in ninth grade, and we'll talk more about that. For some students, sports become very, very important to them. There can certainly be more peer pressure in a lot of different forms. If you're, I'm just laughing because I'm thinking of my children. So if you're close with your children now in middle school, enjoy that time. I have to tell you, it's not uncommon for in high school, especially, sophomore, junior year, where your child might be distancing from you. Know that that is normal. That is what our children need to do in order to separate and grow up. Friendships become much more important to our children. Their friend's opinion might matter more so than yours. And again, I've been through this. It hurts, but just know it's normal. And also, they tend to get less sleep because of all the work and peer pressure, all that other stuff. And just know that sleep still is very, very important for our children. So you're going to see periodically throughout here, I have some tips that I am sharing. So I'm a big believer in the phrase birds of a feather flock together. And a big part of high school is social. And so that was one of the things I remember this is a long time ago when you could get variances to the different high schools. And I was thinking about switching my daughter into a different high school than her home high school. And a friend asked me, a friend who had older children, and she said, "Do you like your daughter's friends?" And I said, "Yes, I do, and I know the parents. I'm very comfortable." And she said, "She said, you don't want, that's a nice thing in middle school, and hopefully your kids stay with their friends, and even if they don't, that's fine. But again, just pay attention. to the friends that your kids have. What are their habits? If, are they academic? Are they sporty? Your child will likely do the same sort of things. It's important to teach your child to be independent and to know that it's okay to fail. And I know a lot of parents don't want to hear that, but I can tell you, I've been a college counselor for a long time. I've worked with a lot of students over the years, and we learn when we fail. When when things go right, everything goes as planned, we don't really learn anything from that experience. So it's okay to fail. Just know if your child struggles in a class or doesn't get the grade that they were hoping for the first semester, that's okay. Learn from that. Teaching children that they're responsible for themselves is a very important lesson for our teens. And then also, and this goes back a little bit to the failing and difficulties and challenges that we're going to have, and we'll talk about perfectionism, but life is not linear. I think a lot of teens think that if they do this and this and this and this and this and this and this, it's going to guarantee the end result that they're hoping for. And it might. But I can tell you from my own experiences and from working with a lot of different teens over the years, life is more like this. It doesn't quite go. And especially when we talk about the college process, this is where the linear part doesn't always coincide with students doing what they think is the right thing to do. So just let them know that sometimes life has surprises for us, and that is all okay. And one of the things that I always remind families is that none of our lives is a one-size-fits-all process. Each and every one of us is different. We have different interests, things that matter to us, different family situations, different abilities, and all that stuff like that. So what is right for somebody else may not be what's right for you, and that's okay. I think just to take that pressure off is important. Okay, so after high school, there are a variety of different paths that students can take. We're going to talk about the four-year college, community and technical college. There's apprenticeships. Some students decide to take a gap year after high school. Some students decide to go into the military, and some go directly into the workforce. And why do we have different paths? Because as I said earlier, we are all different. Hallelujah. You know, it's wonderful that we're all different. Sometimes teens have no idea what they want to do after high school, and so they they take a different path. They want to learn differently. Some teens just, quite frankly, need a break from the pressure of high school. And for some families, it's the cost to be taken into consideration because some of things, the four-year college in particular, is very expensive. And I just encourage families that these different options should be a normal part of the conversation. I get where we live. The four-year college path is what everybody thinks everybody does, but I can tell you that isn't necessarily what everybody does, and it should be celebrated. So before we talk about the four-year college and what colleges we'll be looking at and what you need to consider in high school, I want to talk about community and technical colleges. So you may have heard the term Running Start. I just want to explain what that is because it has to do with community and technical colleges. So Running Start is something that begins, a student can do starting in junior year. Some students do it for 1 year. Some students do it for junior and senior year. Some students wait till senior year. They just do it that year. But what it does is it allows students to fulfill their high school graduation requirements through taking courses at community college. And in our for students to do like Washington Institute of Technology, Central Washington over in Sammamish. Some students go to Cascadia. But what happens is the students go to community college and they earn college credit while they're fulfilling their high school graduation requirements. So, and it's paid for by the state. So if a student, so you might say, well, why would a student do that? Well, if a student did Running Start full time, they could earn an associate degree by the time that they graduate from high school. And so then when they go off to a four-year college, they only have 2 years possibly left. And the way that it works is that, let's say your student's going to be a junior and one of the graduation requirements is English. So they take an English class, English 101. But in the community college, there's students go to school for a quarter, okay? So 1/4 of community college is the equivalent of a year of high school. So a student can get that English requirement taken care of within 10 weeks. Students go to school for 3/4 in the school year, so fall, winter, spring. Full-time is considered 3 classes. So that means a student can take 9 classes over the course of their junior year. So if a student was really interested, let's say in the sciences or in computer science or business, they would have a big variety of classes that they could take if they wanted to go deep into a subject. Um, as I said, it's paid for by the state. Obviously, for some students, this is not something they want to do because they would miss the high school environment and things like that. But just know, Running Start can be a great way for students to go deeper into a subject, earn college credits. There's all sorts of different programs. I've known students who have done their associate degree and they're taking classes that prepares them to be a junior at a four-year college in engineering or business or computer science or sciences or whatever. So just know that there's different programs available. The application process is so much simpler because our community colleges take everybody. There's no standardized test scores and all that stuff. And then the cost, as I said, the state pays for it. And then a family has typically 2 years less of college that they have to pay for, which we'll get into that later. But just know that Running Start's cool, but there are a lot of students who, after they graduate from high school, especially if they don't know what they want to do, they might start at a Bellevue College to take, their basic college courses, again, save money, and then or maybe they didn't have the grades to get into the University of Washington, and that was their dream school. So they get their act together in community college and they apply as a transfer student to UW because half or more than half, something like 70% of the transfer students that the University of Washington takes, they come from community colleges, from the students who have completed their associate degree. So community and technical colleges are wonderful, wonderful programs. They have really good classes, usually have excellent teachers. And I show this. This is the Lake Washington Institute of Technology, which is one of the schools that Running Start students can use. But I just show this because they offer both certificates, they have associate degrees, they have four-year degrees, and these are just the different schools that they have within the Institute of Technology. They have business and engineering and manufacturing, health sciences, IT, all sorts of different things. And then there's apprenticeships. I'm not going to get too much into this, but all an apprenticeship is, it's where a student gets paid to do on-the-job training and take classes at the same time. So it's a great way for students to learn something and then apply it, learn something and apply it, and they get paid. There's good earnings to be had there. And usually a student just has to be at least 18 and then have a high school diploma. So, all right, let's talk about the four-year colleges because I realize that for most families, that's probably what you're the most interested in. I want to stress this fact. This kind of applies to a lot that we're going to talk about in this section. So in the United States, applying to a university or college, and I do use those terms interchangeably. I don't mean to confuse people. It's not a transaction. What I mean by that is that if a student takes X amount of advanced placement classes or gets a certain test score or has a certain GPA. It doesn't guarantee anything, right? That's not how the US system works. It's not a transactional process. And I realize that many parents attended university in countries where it is more transactional, that your admittance to a university is based on your GPA and it's based on a test score, and they might factor those together. The US does not work like that. So that's important for people to understand. And in my job in working with students, I will tell you the beautiful part of working with teens is watching them transform. This is a transformative process. You will be shocked at the difference, especially if this is your oldest child, from your eighth grader to your senior, and watching them grow and learn about themselves. It is truly a wonderful thing. I enjoy it as a college counselor, and I certainly have enjoyed it as a parent myself. So here's just some basic data points about colleges in the United States. So there are about 2,000 four-year public and private universities or colleges. And as I say in the second point, the term college and university are used interchangeably. I will tell you the difference. A university has a graduate school, whereas a college does not. That's the difference. Um, so I just was going, I like data a lot. You'll figure that out pretty soon. So if I were to look at the number of US universities, four-year universities, that accept less than 10% of the applicants, it's 35 schools. And then if I look at those that accept 10 to 25% of the students who apply, it's 70. So when I said that there's 2,000 schools, if if all someone is looking at is that very select number of schools, you're eliminating a lot of wonderful universities, because in the US, at least half the school or 80% of the schools in the US accept about 50% of the students. So please keep an open mind. There is a term you might have heard, highly selective, sometimes known as highly rejective universities. And all a highly selective university is a school that has too many qualified applicants applying for too few spots. And that is a big problem. If you know any college or high school seniors right now, as they've been hearing back from schools, it's tough. And the students are, in almost all the cases, are more than qualified. There just aren't enough spots. So 41% of college freshmen graduate within 4 years, which isn't a very wonderful number because we'll talk about how expensive college is. And 1 in 3 freshmen don't return to the college that they started at for their sophomore year. So these are some basic facts about colleges in the United States. So when our high school students are applying to colleges, and this takes place in the fall of their senior year, there are 5 possible things a college will ask for on their application. And I say possible, and what I mean by that is that there are some colleges that only want 1 of these items. There's some that want 5, and there's some that want every number in between. And that's what makes even talking about college is a little challenging, because they all do things differently. They have different deadlines and they have different platforms and they have different requirements and all this stuff. So there's a lot of moving pieces. So when it's time for your child to apply to college, just know that they may need some help keeping things organized. But you can see the 5 possible things, and I will be going through these: the high school transcript, standardized test scores, a high school activity list, teacher recommendations, and essays. So the high school transcript, this is always required. Students cannot apply to college without a high school transcript. And even if a college wants the 5 things that I just mentioned, test scores and activities and letters of rec and essays, they don't typically weigh them the same. And this is the piece that does get weighed the heaviest. This is the part that they focus on. And it makes sense because this is a student's track record. One of the things that colleges can look at is known as a high school profile. It's also known as a secondary school report. And this is just basically a report card on the high school that the student attends. So um, my kids went to Eastlake, so it would say there's this many thousands of students at Eastlake. This is the demographic breakdown of students. This is the percentage of students who get free and reduced lunch. This is the number of students who, after graduation, go to a four-year college, a two-year college, or enter the military. They'll show average ACT and SAT scores of the students, and then they will list all the classes of rigor. And I'll go more into this in a slide or two. So at Eastlake, the rigor classes would be honors classes, followed by University of Washington in the classroom, UW in the classroom, and then by AP classes. Now, we're surrounded by other districts. So if you know somebody who goes to Skyline, theirs is going to have all that information, but their rigor classes are going to show honors classes and then the IB or International Baccalaureate classes. If you have somebody who's over at Interlake and Bellevue, they have everything. They offer all the different varieties. And that's okay, because all a college wants to know is what's offered at that school. They don't say, if you moved 5 miles down the road, you could have gone to this other high school, or why didn't you do that? Like, nope. They just look at where a student is at. So there are some high school classes that can be taken in middle school. Math is certainly one of them. Algebra 1 and geometry is it's not uncommon for middle school students to take these. I'm going to talk a little bit more about math and my thoughts on that. Any foreign language that a student takes in middle school, Spanish 1, maybe Spanish 1 and 2, French 1 and 2, Mandarin, whatever is offered. So it's interesting, again, because I've been doing this for a long time. Back when my children were in the district, those classes were not on a high school transcript. And, let's face it, colleges know that if a student took Spanish 2 in ninth grade, well, they had to have taken Spanish 1 in eighth grade. Or if a student is taking geometry in ninth grade, they know they took algebra 1 in eighth grade. Like there's a track. But a few years ago, I don't even know how many years it's been now, they moved these grades to a student's transcript. So when your child starts high school and you go onto Skyward and you can look at the unofficial transcript of your student, if your child did any of these in middle school, they will be on their transcript, on their high school transcript. Depending on your child, they may have done really well, got an A. They may have done well and gotten a B, and that's great. There's nothing wrong with Bs. But later on, you may determine, let's face it, a lot of middle school students, they don't always think long term and think about high school and all that stuff like that. So just know if a high school class taken in middle school negatively impacts a student's high school GPA, just know grade point average, just know that you can either have it removed or you can have it changed to pass fail. And there's nothing wrong with that. And if, some people might say, oh, but then they think that the student failed. I don't see that as a thing. And just know that there's a spot on college applications where if a student wanted to say, I got my act together in high school, I had really good study habits, but in middle school, I didn't understand the importance of all these things. I got Bs, but I decided, or C minus or whatever, the student can share that, but just know you don't have to have the grades on your transcript. Okay. So there are rigor classes. And as I said, this is typical. And the reason why colleges want to know the rigor classes offered at a high school is because just like people are different, high schools are different, okay? And we are in a very strong public school district. Our high schools are very wonderful and strong and academic and all that stuff. But there are students in the state of Washington who attend high schools that don't offer regular calculus, let alone AP calculus, AB or BC. So that's why colleges want to know what is offered, okay? So the typical listing would go honors. Some of the high schools have UW in the classroom, some don't. That's okay. Then there's advanced placement. And then, as I said earlier, some districts do offer international baccalaureate. Like Washington doesn't have that. And they're not going to hold that against the students because it's not offered to them. So just know that there are things out of control. And so this is a breakdown of admitted student GPA at the University of Washington in Seattle. So you can see here that, 95% of admitted students to UW Seattle have a 3.5 or higher. So this is where paying attention to GPA can be important to students. I have met with kids in 10th grade who literally had no idea that their grades mattered at all. Just no clue. So they do. They do matter. And then the other thing is in our district, we don't have A minuses. I always tell students this. So an A is from a 90 to 100. We don't have A pluses either, just FYI, but we have A's from 90 to 100. The minute a student gets to an 89.9, that is a B plus. Nothing wrong with a B plus, but it is a 0.7 drop in GPA. Again, there's nothing wrong with B's. It's all good. However, I just want students to pay attention to the fact that it's 6 weeks before the end of the semester. I have an 89.9. I wonder what I can do. And again, if they can't do anything, or if they've done everything they can and it's gotten to an 87.5, okay, that's, again, I don't have a problem with it, but just to be aware because it does ding the GPA. It dings it. So, so if I was talking to a junior in high school and their GPA is a 3.3 GPA, which is a B plus, and they're telling me that UW Seattle is their dream, I do have to break it to them that it's highly unlikely. No, it's not impossible. I actually worked with two seniors last year who had I think one was a 3.3 and one was a 3.4, and they both got into UW. I was thrilled for them, but it doesn't happen that often. And as I said, there's other paths like going to community college and then transferring in. But I just want you to see this because it's data and it tells you something. So what in regard to transcript, and please, this is something I feel really strongly about. Please do not have your child take advanced math classes over the summer. Do not do it. It is not a good thing. The only exception to this is geometry. If your child wants to take geometry to get up ahead in order to take algebra 2, but there's a track, okay? And I see a lot of this, okay? Students come in and these sophomores are taking AP Calc AB, and that's not a good thing, okay? Especially these kids who are interested in computer science or engineering, because what happens is they run out of math classes. The colleges see that at most of our, I think all of our high schools, most of them, AP Calculus AB and BC are the highest math classes. So these kids who are done with calculus in junior year, they don't have any other options. Now you can say, well, they can take AP Stats. AP Stats is not a math class. It is a math-based class. Nothing wrong with AP Stats. But if your child is stopping with calculus in junior year, they're going to be going almost 18 months without calculus. And then there's just a gap. And colleges don't expect students to be taking all these classes. But the biggest problem, this is the biggest problem that I see, and I saw this during COVID and remote learning, that God bless the teachers, but there was one class universally that did not translate well to remote learning, and it was math. Oh my God, I would see these kids who had been so strong prior to the pandemic, and then they had that gap, and then they came back, and these kids, they thought they were okay because the teachers passed them, but they didn't learn anything. And so now what I'm seeing is so many kids, they take these, Apex or BYU, whatever. They cram a whole year's worth of math into summer, and there's much better things for your kids to be doing in the summertime than making them take advanced math classes. Anyways, they take these classes and they do well. They go, oh, I got an A. It was so easy. Yeah, but they didn't learn anything. And then they get into the high school or into their, in the fall, and they're starting these hard math classes, and they do not have the foundational skills to do the math, and they're getting C's and D's in their AP classes, and it's just a bad situation. So please, please do not hold hands and say, okay, even though you hear everybody talking about it, that doesn't make it right. Okay, do not have your child take advanced math courses. Be careful with the amount of rigor your child decides to take. Okay, I encourage kids, and when I meet with family kids, I always say, well, what classes do you enjoy the most? What classes don't you enjoy? And human nature says the subjects that we enjoy the most, we're willing to do the harder work. But what's happening is these kids, and again, I see these kids coming into my office and they're not listening to me. They're like, no, my friends, they're all taking 5 AP classes. And then the parents go, well, I thought it was too much, but they really want to take it. I'm here to tell you, parents, these kids, their brains aren't formed yet. The frontal cortex here, they're succumbing to peer pressure. And please do not. I have seen kids who are like, yes, I'm so excited. And then when I see them junior year with those 5 AP classes and their eyes are dead and they've lost their spirit, and then senior year they write essays about how they contemplated suicide. And I am not kidding about this. So please, if you care about your children's mental health, and I am sure that you do, back away from the madness. Okay, it is crazy out there. I see the Facebook pages. Please do not push your child. Oh, okay, you're going to take 6 classes. Again, maybe sophomore year they take one. Maybe junior year they take two, three, but don't overwhelm them, because it has to be balanced, and there's more things that colleges are going to look at. And remember, this is not a transaction. This is not, oh, if you do 10 AP classes by the time you graduate, you are guaranteed admission to whatever. No, it doesn't work like that. So please don't buy into that. Don't get sucked into that talk, because it's not true. And as I said, remember that colleges compare a student's high school transcript to what's offered at their high school. They're not comparing it to elsewhere. Be the parent, and please be a good role model. And if you need me to give you some points, I'll give you my Find Your Fit email. I will gladly hold your hand and help you take a deep breath with this, because this is a bad situation. It gets worse and worse and worse. And then I want to talk about perfectionism. Oh my gosh, these poor kids, they all think they have to be perfect. Sometimes I'll ask parents, well, tell me about strengths of your child. And they'll say, oh, they're a perfectionist. And I have to remind them that perfectionism is not a positive trait. It's very hurtful to the kids. So I like this quote. It's not the key to success. Research shows that perfectionism hampers achievement. It's correlated with depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis or missed opportunities. None of us are perfect. Nobody's perfect. I, you don't have to have perfect grades. I saw a parent asking how their child can retake a B class, a class they got a B in. There's nothing wrong with a B. College, even if you went through all the work of retaking the class, colleges wouldn't accept it, because they would see both grades, and they won't replace Bs because there's nothing wrong with a B. So remember what I said earlier, we learn when we have failures. When I meet with kids and helping them with telling their stories for essays, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I did this and this, and they forget the middle part. And I'm like, did you fail? Did you have a problem? Oh yeah. And then they start telling me about those things. And I'm like, That's when you learn the most. Let's focus on that and how you grew from that. That's what colleges want to see. Nobody is perfect. Nobody's a robot. Okay, that's enough of my um, transcript, but I see a lot of it and it really gives me some sleepless nights. Okay, let's talk about standardized testing. There are two tests, the ACT and the SAT. Colleges do not have a preference. Again, I don't want to go too deep in the weeds here because middle school students don't need to do anything. These tests are meant to measure what a typical junior in high school knows, okay? Junior. So even if your kid is super smart, there's no point in them taking it in ninth grade. If they're smart, they're going to do even better in junior year. Um, COVID was interesting because prior to COVID, pretty much every school, or the majority of schools that students would apply to, required standardized test scores, ACT or SAT. And then because testing was not possible for quite a while, many schools went test optional, some went test blind. And again, you are at the earliest, the class of 29, I think I said, yeah, 29, maybe the class of 30. I do not have a crystal ball. I cannot predict what's going to happen. But I can tell you that currently, none of the public universities in the state of Washington, that includes University of Washington, they don't use test scores for admissions. University of California, Cal State schools, they don't use them. And you might say, oh, but I've heard, yeah, there's been some schools, UT Austin, Purdue, the Ivy Leagues. And again, I'm not against testing. I'll give you my tips, but just know, again, we're all different. There are some students who test well and some students who don't. And at this point, it's very easy for me to come up with a strong college list for students that doesn't, for students who say, I don't want to test, I don't test well, I'd rather use my energies elsewhere. And again, if you're going to put energy, again, I'd rather they put it into their classes and some other things. So as I said, middle school students shouldn't be doing anything to prepare for these tests, with the exception of reading. Reading is an important element, and I've been seeing a lot of articles about how students they don't read anymore. I'm not saying they don't know how to read, but like I love reading a novel or and things, and they're having a hard time with that in college. So reading might be a good activity. And as far as the math for these tests, they assume that a student has taken Algebra 2. Okay, so what happens in our district is sophomore year, the district pays for students to take the PSAT. The P in front of the SAT stands for preliminary. Now, these scores are not used, they're not sent anywhere. It's just an introduction to standardized testing, okay? So that would that introduces the student to the SAT. My recommendation is around the same time, I would have my child take a mock ACT. This isn't hard to do. Most of the PTSAs at the high schools in the area offer a mock ACT and SAT in the spring and the fall. They do it as a fundraiser. I think they cost like $25 or something. Or you can go to any standardized test prep, Huntington, Sylvan, those type of places. You can take a mock test there. Anyways, have them do it around the same time. And then you can compare your scores. There's something called a concordance chart. If you type it in concordance chart, it'll pop up. And so if your child got, no, here in front of me. So if my child got let's say they got a 1240 on the PSAT, the highest score is a 1520, 15, yeah, something like that, 1520. If they'd gotten a 1250, that would be the equivalent of 26 on the ACT. So if they took a mock ACT and let's say they got a 22, I'd be like, oh, obviously the SAT is your test. Or if they got a 29 on the ACT, I'd say, oh, ACT is your test. And if they got a 26 or maybe a 27, I'd say to my child, did you like the format of one better than the other? Okay, so generally speaking, SAT is more math-based, it's digital. ACT is more reading-based. It's supposedly going digital, but it isn't right now, so I don't want to talk about that. But anyways, but that's what I would do. So in 10th grade, you would have an idea which direction. Again, your children have a lot going on, homework and other things we're going to talk about. So just figure out which test is best suited for them. And then you can make plans accordingly. Students have till late fall of senior year to take these tests and all this stuff. But one of the things I would recommend parent to parent, because I've gone through this, ask your child what they're willing to do to prepare for these tests if they decide that, again, I can't predict what the environment's going to be like in 2028, 2029. If you have a child who says, I'm not willing to do anything, I would tell you, I probably wouldn't put a lot of money into standardized test prep, because you can spend thousands of dollars there because you can't make them. They can say, yeah, I'm doing it, but ask them what they're willing to do and believe them. And just know some students prep, take a class. Some students do absolutely nothing. Some students self-study. I have two kids and they both did it differently. So just know there's different formats. Again, don't want to go too deep, but I would absolutely take the PSAT in fall of junior year or fall of, sorry, fall of sophomore year. If a student takes the PSAT in the fall of junior year, that can be used for national merit, just so you know that. Again, don't want to go too deep. Okay, so I think it's very hard for students and parents to understand when you hear of, 3% acceptance rates, 5% acceptance rates, all that kind of stuff like that. So this is a chart that I talked about highly selective schools, which means that there's too many qualified students applying for too few spots. So this has been updated for fall 24 admissions, but you can see, like Brown, 51,000 applied, 48,000 were rejected. MIT, 33,000 applied, 32,000 were rejected. UPenn, 59,000 applied, 55,000 were rejected. And the admissions people will say, yeah, 85, 90% of the students who apply are more than qualified. We simply don't have enough spots. And this is where I talk about, the transcript and test scores, because I can tell you that the majority of those students who are qualified, yes, they have good grades. They've got mostly A's. Not all A's, mostly A's. They've taken classes of rigor. They most likely have strong standardized test scores. And by strong, probably 95 percentile or higher. But again, it's not that uncommon where we live, or with high school students in general. So what else do colleges look at? So this is the piece where I say, I tell families, this is why you don't want to put too much rigor, because those rigor classes take up a lot of time. And then students don't, if all they're doing is the rigor classes, they don't have time to do other things. And this is the high school activity list. And this is something that begins in ninth grade. It'll be one of the resources that I send. I'll send you a blank one. But it's a working document. And basically, colleges want to know, starting in ninth grade, and ninth grade technically begins the day eighth grade is over. What does a student do when they're not in school and they're not doing homework? So, and in my opinion, so the Seattle market, teen market, high school market, whatever, is very strong. We have all these technology companies that employ very intelligent people. Many of them are parents, probably sitting in this audience, who then have very intelligent children. So as I said, strong GPAs, lots of rigor. It's not uncommon. It describes most of the students that I work with. So a student's activities can help differentiate from all these students who have similar data points. So many colleges are admitting college freshmen directly into majors. And this is specifically prevalent in majors like computer science and engineering and nursing and business, some of the more selective things. So a student's activities can help prove to a college that they know that this is what they want to do because of this experience that they've had outside of the classroom. And more importantly, activities can help a student learn if they are on the right path. Because again, a lot of high school students, oh, I'm going to be an engineer, I'm going to be a doctor, I'm going to be do computer science, but they don't really know what that entails. And so some activities, not all of them, students should have fun in their activities too, but I think it's a good idea to explore careers in their activities too. So some of the possible categories for these high school activities, one are clubs within the high school. They can also do things in the community. They can be involved in sports. But if your child doesn't play sports, fine. You can still get admitted to college without any sports. That's okay. It might be through a religious organization. They do differentiate between extracurricular activities and volunteer activities. And a lot of times parents will say to me, well, my child won't volunteer at anything. And I get it. It can be scary for kids and again, they've got anxiety and things. So a good way to start the volunteering, and there's no requirement, there's no service, like there are some school districts that require students to have X amount of service hours and things like that. We don't do that in our district. But I think volunteering can be helpful. And so I always say maybe start with a family volunteering. Okay. And by volunteering, I don't mean 40 hours a week. And it can be like once a month for an hour or 2 hours. But, think about what your family values are. Maybe you care about the environment. Maybe you care about LGBTQ, maybe you care about food insecurity, like whatever you as a family, and then find something for you to do together. If your teen is really into sports, maybe have them volunteer to be an assistant coach for a sport that they like with younger kids or things like that. But um, there's lots of ways to encourage students to get involved with volunteer. Some students have jobs. That's great. I think jobs really teach teens a lot. Some teens have hobbies and special interests. I'll find out that like teens, maybe they might write music, they might create videos, they might write screenplays or build Tesla coils in their garage. Like it doesn't have to be organized activities necessarily. They can be, but colleges just want to know, how does a student spend their time? And some teens have family responsibilities. I know when I was in high school, I had a little brother that I needed to take care of because my mom and dad were both working. So anyways, so regarding the activities, this is an area that I believe where students can really differentiate themselves. Help them to explore their interests, not necessarily your interests or what you think they should be doing. Um, you know, I, I always say, the teens who, if there's a problem in the world that they want to do their little part of the solution or something that breaks their heart, something that doesn't have to be big, but something that they care about. And that really can make a difference. Volunteering as a family, as I mentioned earlier, students should not be doing anything to look good to a college. It comes off fake and phony and inauthentic. Again, they should do it because it interests them and it's something that they care about. Depth is better than width. And what I mean by that is sometimes I meet these kids who, by the end of ninth grade, they're involved in 20 to 25 activities, but they don't really care about any of them. They just think it makes them look good. Colleges would actually prefer that a student went deep, just pick a couple things that they really cared about and develop that and go deeper. And I've said this even before COVID and the change in standardized testing, the importance of standardized testing. I think activities are an area where students can really stand out and shine differently than just a data point. So I always think that this is more important than focusing on trying to improve an SAT score by 100 points or something like that. So another possible thing is that some colleges will ask for letters of recommendation. Uh, they, again, not all of them do. Uh, they might ask for a letter from the high school counselor. When you hear about letters of rec, though, it's typically high school teachers. So the rule is that any teacher recommendations, the teacher must have taught the student in high school, even if the teacher leaves, as long as the student can communicate with them. Many colleges that require teacher recommendations will also allow what's known as an outside recommender. And so, this could be a coach, it could be a boss, it could be an internship that they're doing and their supervisor and things like that. So my tips in this area is simply encourage your student or teach them how, demonstrate, model it for them of how to engage with adults, okay? Encourage your teacher to talk to their teachers. I met with a student today who was asking for advice on what classes to pick for next year. And a couple of times I said to the student, you should go ask your teacher if they think you're ready for this next level class. Because, and that's a great way for students to get into the habit of talking to their teachers, or, to say, oh, if it's I don't know, a science class, well, I'm thinking about becoming a doctor. Do you have any advice for me in chemistry or biology? Like just engaging with the teachers, because teachers are human beings. No one has to write letters of rec. It's above and beyond their job description. And human nature is just that, hey, the kids who are nice to the teachers are probably more likely to get them to be willing to write the letters of rec. So just getting in the habit, because it's easier to ask somebody for a letter of rec, which is a tremendous amount of work for a teacher to do if the student has been engaging with them. And again, like in ninth grade, so colleges tend to prefer junior, senior year teachers because the work is more recent, it's more difficult, that type of thing. The child's more mature. But, maybe just get in the conversation of, oh, if you had to ask two teachers in ninth grade to write you a letter of recommendation, who would it be and why? And just have these conversations with them so they start thinking about it. Typically, students ask teachers from core classes, just FYI. So it's the math, the science, the history, the English. Okay, college essays. Um, uh, Again, it depends. It depends on the college. I have some students who have no college essays that they had to write. Hooray. I had other students who might have two or three, and then I had students who had to write 40 or more. It depends. It's going to depend on a student's college list. But basically, a college essay is conversational storytelling. And I keep going back to activities, but let's say your child, I don't know, gets an internship, or they uh, have a summer job, or they have a project that they're working on. I always encourage students just to keep a little log of these type of longer term things. Maybe they're the president of a club at school or something like that. But whenever there's a problem, just jot it down. And then when they figure out how to solve the problem, jot down what their solution was. Because later on, when they're writing those college essays, those examples can be very powerful to show, oh, you want to understand my leadership skills or my critical thinking skills or this. And again, human nature is we forget that type of stuff. But if it's written down, oh yeah, I forgot I'd done that. Students need to write in their voice, and please do not write your children's college essays for them. It's very obvious when parents do. Okay, I thought I'd be done before 8, but it looks like I'll be going a few minutes over. Okay, almost done though. So I always want to make sure that parents understand the three types of colleges in the United States, because the type of college drastically impacts the admissibility for a student, and then also the cost quite dramatically. So we are in Washington State, and we have 6 public universities: University of Washington, Washington State, Western, Eastern, Central, and Evergreen State College. I will focus on UW because that tends to be the ones parents care about. So we live in the state of Washington, so we're Washington State residents. So if your child is applying to UW, they get priority admission because they are Washington State residents. A good example of this is the computer science program, the Paul Allen School of Computer Science. The acceptance rate into that for a Washington resident is 25%. If an out-of-state student is, or an international student is applying, the acceptance rate is 2%. So you can see the advantage. And UW, 66% of admitted students are Washington State residents. So there's a big change there. The other thing is because we pay property taxes, and property taxes fund education. Because of all the property taxes that we pay, they deeply discount the tuition at our 6 public universities. UW and Washington State are the most expensive. They're a little over $12,000 a year for tuition, not room and board, but tuition. And while it's not cheap, it is compared to the other numbers that I'll be sharing with you. So that's why so many families want their children to attend in-state universities, is because of the cost factor. It's hard to beat that. Then we have the out-of-state public universities. And I have to speak very broadly here because I'm talking about 49 states, and everybody does things differently. But first of all, you are not a resident in these 49 states, so you've lost the priority admission. And that comes into play big time in states like Texas and Georgia and things like that, California. Second thing, because you're not a resident, you haven't paid property taxes. So you've lost the tuition discount. So out of state students, non-resident students, typically pay 3 times in-state tuition. So again, it depends. So California is an interesting state because they have 2 systems. They've got the Cal State system and then the University of California system. And so for instance, San Diego State University, wonderful university, very popular with kids in our area. The tuition is about $20,000 a year, which isn't too bad compared to I said UW's about 12. I mean, that's not too bad. Cost of living is a little higher in San Diego than it might be here, but it's fairly reasonable for many families. But if a student wanted to attend University of California, San Diego, the tuition is probably closer to $48,000, and again, plus room and board. So it's a lot more expensive. I want to mention, I said something about Texas. So UT Austin is a very popular school. A lot of students say, I want to go to UT Austin. And it's a great school. I'm not denying that. But I want to explain to you why it's so difficult for students to get admitted there if they don't live in the state of Texas. So 75% of the students who are admitted to UT Austin are admitted through a program that they have through the state legislature where the top 6% of students at each high school are guaranteed admission. So as you can imagine, that's a big thing. So they're guaranteed admission. So that takes up a lot of spots. And then also by state law, the maximum amount of out-of-state students, which includes international students, that they can accept is 10%. So you can imagine if, again, just looking at the data, like kids will be like, oh, and I'm like, it's not you, you're qualified. It's very, very hard. And so just keep that into mind. And so some out-of-state publics are generous. They want out-of-state students and they'll say welcome and they'll throw scholarship money at them. Other out-of-state student or schools will say, we're very protective and we will not give any scholarship money to anyone except our residents. So, again, paying attention to the cost factor. And then there's private universities, and sometimes families will say, oh, we won't even consider them because they're so expensive. They're actually not that much more expensive or on par with out-of-state publics, generally speaking. But there are some private universities that are very generous with scholarship money because they know that they're competing against, let's say, a UW, and it can be easier for students to get into their computer science programs and their high quality programs. And so just keep an open mind is what I always say. Then there's a list of schools called WUE schools. If you're interested, just type in the letters WUE, but it stands for Western Undergraduate Exchange. And what it is, there's 14 states. Washington is one of them. And I mentioned that out-of-state non-residents tend to pay 3 times in-state tuition. For the schools that participate in WUI, you would pay 1.5 times. So it's a huge cost savings. It's not all public schools within the 14 states, unfortunately, but there are some, good schools, good programs that are part of WUI. So for students who want to go out of state, that's another option for them. And when it comes to the cost of college, unfortunately, the US system was designed where parents are expected to pay. This doesn't mean your kid can say, Mom and Dad, you have to pay, but it's not so the government doesn't subsidize for college. So cost is an important part of fit. And it's a good time in middle school to start thinking about this instead of senior year when your child's all hot and bothered about a place. Um, there's two types of money aid that students can get. There's need-based aid and there's merit aid. Merit aid is not applied for. Need-based aid is there's forms that people have to fill out, but merit aid is typically a tuition discount to attract students to attend a school, and it's based on a student's grades. It used to be test scores too. By the time your kids are applying, it could be test scores again. I don't know, but there are schools that can give, $15,000 a year for 4 years, 20,000, 30,000, 35,000. They'll be generous with the money. And so it's a good idea to start thinking about it now, as I said, and have an honest conversation with your children. And this is the annual cost of college here. This is based on this year's rates. You can see like Western is a lot less expensive. They've got great programs. I have Gonzaga on here, which shows it as being pretty expensive, but Gonzaga is one of those private universities, really strong engineering, nursing, business school, computer science, data science. And a strong student can get, I don't know, $35,000 a year, which would make it on par with UW. Um, Colorado State, I'm showing the WUI price. So you can see there's quite a big discount there. And then I brought in Lake Washington Technical College. You can see that their tuition is $7,400 a year, which is great. So just know that, again, some kids maybe start at a place like Lake Washington Tech for 2 years and then transfer over to a UW or something. So just about done here. Again, so nobody wants to go to a bad college. I don't want anybody to go to a bad college. But when I'm looking at a good college, I'm not paying any attention to acceptance rates. I'm not paying any attention to rankings. I'm looking at things like graduation rate. Remember what I said, birds of a feather flock together. If most kids are graduating in 4 years, I always felt my kids could graduate in 4 years. And with how expensive college is, that was important to me. The retention rate, the percentage of freshmen who come back for their sophomore year. The average in the US is about 70%. I want my kids to go to schools that it's closer to 90% or above, because those are schools that are supporting their freshmen and engaging them in campus and making them feel part of things. And that's going to be a more successful student. Do they have the programs offered? Again, students don't necessarily have to know what they want to do, but if they think they might want to be an engineer and a school doesn't have engineering, something's got to give, whether it's the school or the dream. Again, does the cost work? Um, you know, this is an important part that I wish more families would pay attention to early versus waiting till senior year. And does the culture of the college fit the student? Colleges have personalities and vibes, and they are all different, and it's important to pay attention to that. So last thing, and then I'll go to any questions that you might have if you're still here. Um, so how can you support your children? And I know we all love our children and we want them to be happy and healthy and successful. That's what I think the dream of every parent is. So try not to get too stressed out. Do your best not to do things for them. Teach them how to do things. If it's how to talk to a teacher, how to do their laundry, the life skills, let them fail. Obviously, you're not, you got a support system there, but it's good for them to learn what happens and see the consequences. Um, Encourage them not to get in the habit of retaking exams. That's kind of a big thing in high school. I think it really started more so in after COVID. I think the teachers were told to try to let kids retake, but they can't do that in college. So I think it sets them up for a harder transition to college. Remember, the frontal lobe of their brain is not yet developed, and it won't be until their 20s. So don't pressure them to that they have to attend a certain college to be a certain college major or career, or even attend a certain college. Sometimes I've heard parents say, well, I was not accepted to XYZ school, so you better be to, get the family honor back. That puts that puts a lot of pressure on kids. Be careful about only talking about Ivy League and the most selective schools. There's a wonderful amount of schools out there. Again, caution against too much rigor. Um, you heard me on my soapbox earlier. Listen to your kids. What an eighth grader and ninth grader thinks versus what a senior thinks. It's my son in eighth grade wanted to be an actor. I think he'd be humiliated if he heard that, he'd be like, what? But he did. Um, and he didn't become one. And again, there's nothing wrong if he had. We had some things we talked about it with if that was what he really wanted to do. But then he ended up becoming a physical therapist. So um, just know that they can change. And let's see. And none of this defines your child. None of this defines you as a parent. And I think sometimes we get caught up in that. And so, like I said, take a deep breath. So this isn't for anybody in middle school because you shouldn't be creating a college list. But if you know anybody who's in high school, parents in high school, and they're like, we got to think about a college list, I will be doing a webinar next Tuesday, the 11th. There's a $10 fee that all 100% goes to the Lake Washington Schools Foundation to fund programs. If you're not familiar with Find Your Fit, I've done a lot of different webinars. I do some in person too, but the webinars are all recorded and they're available on the Lake Washington Schools Foundation website under the Find Your Fit tab. And, like we did one last week on international colleges, and the week before we did one on helping your teen explore careers and college majors and things like that. And I often bring in guest speakers. You can always email me at findyourfit@lwsf.org. I'm not hard to find. Follow the foundation or Find Your Fit on social media if you want to know what is coming up. And now I can answer questions, but I'm going to turn off the recording.